Good evening and welcome back to my channel. As always, my name is Lewis and today we're going to do my August lockdown book haul, which has been frankly quite a tragic month in terms of buying books, and then also some sci-fi fantasy books that not a lot of people, at least that I'm aware of, talk about. So first off, for the book haul we have everyone's new Japanese literature favorite, Before the Coffee Gets Cold, by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. This one I have read, and I really enjoyed it. I think the last story, I think I mentioned on the channel before, I think the last story was probably my favorite, just because of the way that, as opposed to just going backwards in times, you have, like, it was just a really, really fun way having the two time streams interacting. We've also got The Roads to Sata by Alan Booth. This one I finished the other week just because being inside for more or less 2 months now has started to make me go a bit stir crazy. So I wanted to read something different. I was planning to do a hike around Shikoku as part of the Shikoku pilgrimage when I graduate at the end of the year. That seems very unlikely. So this, I got to live vicariously. In this, Alan Booth walks from the very top of Japan up at, I forget the name of it, all the way to the bottom at Sata, back in the 70s. It was a really fun book, and it was this really well-written piece of escapism. And if you've got any interest in Japan, it was well worth a read. Next up, we have Contacts by Mark Watson. This one I found out about because I was watching a bunch of Taskmaster compilations on YouTube, and Mark Watson was really funny, so I was like, alright, I'll give it a Google, and then I saw he's got a new book. I was like, alright, I'll give this a crack. In this book, James Chiltern, just before midnight, sends out a text saying that he is going to kill himself before he puts his phone onto flight mode and then travelling up from Euston Station to Edinburgh, because he's got a specific bridge that meant a lot to him, which is going to throw himself off. So this book is about all the people who receive the phone message, as well as intercut with bits of James's past and his present on the train. And it was really great, except for like the last 2 chapters. It threw me a bit. And if you've read the book, please reach out. I need someone to talk about it with, because no one I know has read it. And we have Eating Animals by Jonathan Safran Fowl. Thank you to Emmy Reeds for finally kicking me up the arse. Not actually, I don't think she knows I exist. To finally get around to reading this. This one, as someone who has been vegan for almost 2 years, there wasn't a lot of new things that did shock me in terms of the way that animals are treated in terms of agriculture. However, I still think it's a really valuable read, especially because the way that, as opposed to other books about eating animals and just eating food in general, it's not as cut and dry as it can be made out to be. You do have that nuance, and I think Fowl really touches upon the nuance that is present in animal agriculture and the way that food systems are set up, especially in the US. Obviously, in Australia, it is a bit different, but there is no Australian equivalent at the moment, which is a bit annoying, but hopefully one day. Next up, we have Shenzhen by Delisle. Either way, fantastic book. I pretty much read every one of Delisle's graphic novels that I can get my hands on this year, so I'm still missing, I think, 2. Got the rest. I've got Pyongyang, Burma Chronicles, North Korea, and Shenzhen. For those of you who don't know Delisle's work, he is a non-fiction graphic artist who has travelled to various cities. His partner also works with Médecins Sans Frontières, so there's that sort of charity work and really pulling back some of the stuff that certain backwards regimes don't necessarily want you to see. I think it's a really valuable and it's a really great exploration of the non-fiction medium. Next, we have a late birthday present from one of my friends in Leeds. We have Outraged, Why Everyone is Shouting and No One Was Talking by Ashley Dotty Charles. This one was a short read. I think I finished it in one sitting because I was just sitting around in lockdown because that's the only thing I seem to be doing. I've put on a bit of weight as a result of that. This one was really good. It really talks about a lot of the discourse that happens in terms of internet outrage. Like, as someone who has really grown up with that, who watched the sort of culture war sort of stuff that was going on the internet for a while, you really get that sense of disconnect a lot of people have. It's very much an us versus them mentality, which is not something you really want, especially since you can have such great communities and bring people together on the internet, and then it's just this constant cycle of outrage onto the next outrage, onto the next outrage. The only issue is I don't think anything can really be done to fix that, which is a shame. Then we have, speaking of shame and outrage, we have Them, Adventures with Extremists by Jon Ronson. I read The Men Who Stare at Goats a few years ago. I watched the movie a few years before that. It took me 3 chapters into Men Who Stare at Goats to realise that the book was non-fiction, whereas the film was a highly fictionalised version of it all. I've also read Shame this year, which I'll talk about in my end of year wrap-up, because that's going to be a doozy. But this one was really interesting because it was written at a time, like very late 90s, early 2000s, in which there was, honestly, it didn't seem as much as an extreme time as it is today. Because, as mentioned in the Dotty Charles book, like, everyone is outraged, everyone is quick to label people an extremist, or just angry or wrong, and I think it would be really great if Ronson was able to go back and visit or revisit some of the stuff, or see like them too, just to see what the face of extremism on the left and right sort of looks like, because I think that'd be really, really fascinating. Also, some of the stuff about the Bilderberg group right at the end. I know Alex Jones was in there, and I know it's all just out of proportion, but especially with, you know, the whole Epstein stuff, it can be a bit suspect. I don't know. I'm not getting involved in that today. Then we have 2 books that arrived today. As I mentioned, I work in a bookshop, so I get to see a lot of books that come in, and these ones were also recommended to me by a tutor I had. So we have Olive Kitteridge and Olive Again by Elizabeth Strout. I've not read these yet, but they do seem like the kind of warm, just sort of comfort sort of read that you need when you're, I think it's 10 weeks into lockdown now. Now, obviously, up in Sydney, it's not as bad as Melbourne or in the UK last year, which was incredibly messed up. But it's still not been great. And I think this bit of light escapist fiction should be fun. Should help me out of this slump that I've been on. And we also have The River of Lost Footsteps by Thant, Myint-U. As mentioned, I read The Hidden History of Burma earlier this month. I think it was this month. All the days just blur together, really. Really enjoyed that. I've got a final project subject that I'm doing about Burmese democratic process in the early 2000s. So this one should be really good in helping to understand a lot of the context about Burma. And, you know, Burma, I think, is a fascinating place. And I'm not just saying that because I am Burmese. Whitest Burmese guy you'll know. And this one also arrived today, along with Elizabeth Strout books. We have A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. I've heard a lot of things about this. I've been eyeing it up at work for a while. For whatever reason, this lockdown, I found myself moving away from a lot of the fantasy staples that I usually read, and trying to read a lot more like literary fiction, just general fiction, more non-fic than anything. I don't know. I think it's just, I don't know what it is that's making me do this, but yeah, this one my friend Tara has said that it's the darkest book she's ever read, and that I need to be in a well mental state for this. Lockdown, probably not the best idea to be reading that, because, you know, everyone's gone a bit mad, but it should be fun. I started reading it on my walk to the shops this afternoon, and I'm enjoying it so much. I'm getting sort of Donna Tartt vibes, which is not necessarily a bad thing, so I'll keep you updated. And then we also have another Myint-U book. We have The Making of Modern Burma. This one seems more like a textbook than anything. Again, for the assignment. More Burma books. You know, hidden history. Don't know if I got this month. Don't know if I got it last month. Brain has left the building. Burmese days. I think I got this last month. I can't remember, honestly. Anyway, enough of that malarkey. Let's get on to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9. 9. That's a lucky rounded number. You know what? We'll do 10. So 10 fantasy sci-fi books you may not have read, but I think you should. So first off, we have Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman. I know Neil Gaiman isn't exactly an unknown author by any stretch of the imagination, but at least in the circles that I operate in and talk to, not a lot of people have actually read Neverwhere. This was actually my first Gaiman that I read. I think I might have read Ocean at the End of the Lane beforehand, Coraline maybe, but this one was really great. If you can get your hands on the Chris Riddle edition, either in hardcover or paperback, I would highly recommend it. Chris Riddle has worked with Gaiman a lot, and I think the art style really complements the writing, and it really adds to the whole ambiance of it all. So I'll give you a little plot summary. So Richard Mayhew, he helps this bleeding girl on a pavement. You know, she's on the run from 2 assassins, which is not something that really you want to be on the run from, I'll be honest with you. And then everyone just seems to forget him after his contact, and then he ends up on this grand adventure with Dor, who is the girl, and it was really great. Next up, one way back in the archives, we have Harry Harrison's West of Eden. That's right, this isn't a East of Eden knockoff. This is, the whole premise of this book is if the Yucatan impactor, sorry, the Chicxulub impactor, my mistake, never landed, and dinosaurs have evolved to become these sort of humanoid, you can see them, just that humanoid sorts of creatures. And then they find these cavemen, and it's all about the two societies mixing, and it's this really over-the-top, really, 60s? 80s, but that sort of over-the-top, pulpy sort of sci-fi vibes. It's great. It's got a lot of good conflicts. The only downside about this one is I think I stole this from my dad, and I haven't been able to find the 2 sequels anywhere. So if you do find yourself fascinated by that, you may also have that problem as well. But if you can get your hands on it, I would recommend. Now this one was in my shortlist for last year's favourite book, The Library of the Unwritten by A.J. Hackwith. It did not win last year's favourite book, I'm sorry to say. That'll be subject for another video, I think. But this one is really, really great. It's about this woman, Claire. She works in a library filled with every book that's ever unfinished, which I'm sure there's a few of mine in there. So it's unfinished in terms of the writer, not unfinished in terms of people who DNF books. So more or less a hero breaks out of the library and out of their book, and Claire has to go rescue them, and it ends up being this massive conflict between heaven and hell. There's other religions there, and it's fantastic, and it's this really great dissection of the art of storytelling and what stories can mean to people. And I'm really enjoying that sort of push in terms of like that sort of magical realism, light fantasy, like with 10,000 Laws of January and Aaron Morganson's masterpiece, The Starless Sea, which I could probably do a whole half-an-hour video on. If you want me to do that, let me know. I'll do it. But yeah, this is great. The sequel came out for America last year, for Australia in April, which is a real kick in the teeth. I enjoyed it not as much as the first one. I think the first one just is that much more special and just so good. The third one is coming out for Americans, I think the Brits, this year. For me, next year. Thank you. But hopefully it should be a really great conclusion to the trilogy. Then we have To Be Taught If Fortunate by Becky Chambers. I'm not talking about the Galactic Common books this year because I think a lot of people are aware of it, and I sort of want to do a whole video on them because I think they're really sweet. So we're talking about To Be Taught If Fortunate by Becky Chambers, and it's all about this this group of people where these space explorers, they can transform their bodies to adapt to alien environments, which is a lot less, it's more eco-friendly than terraforming, which is probably a good thing because, while humans are great, we do have the habit of destroying environments and everything, really. So there's a few crewmates, and it's like these 4 sort of interconnected vignettes about different life forms that they find in different planets and relationships back on Earth with the crewmates there. And it's told with Becky Chambers' gorgeous and devastating prose and writing style. So if you liked The Wayfarers, you'll really enjoy this book. And then we have an Australian on the list, which is always good. Last Mile in Sunder City. I would really recommend this for fans of the Ben Aranovich Rivers of London books, which are just up there off screen. More or less, Fetch Phillips is this take no nonsense sort of what's the word for it? Dog's body. He does whatever you pay him to do, and it's all about exploring this really great. It's very selective because throughout the book up until the end they make reference to this big event, and Fetch is involved in it, but he refuses to talk about it in specific. And I think that was really good. Overall, it's like really funny. It's got that sort of Gentleman Bastards, Name of the Wind sort of style, but mixed with that sort of Australian irreverence, which is something we all want to see, let's be honest. That's why Captain Boomerang is so popular. And more or less, the whole thing is Fetch. Like, humans are pretty despised in that world, and Fetch destroyed all the magic. So it's almost like he's trying to make amends for it. And that's all I'll talk about it on that one today. Then we have Farlander by Cole Buchanan. This one, it's a bit battered, I know. I don't remember when I got this. I think it was at least 2012, maybe earlier, maybe in an airport, perhaps. But this one was great. It's this really sort of, I'll find the map. It's this almost Mediterranean style ocean. There's like big religious cults and assassins and airships and steampunk, which is always a good thing. And it was great, and it really plays with your expectations, and it shows like how one of the main characters in this is really old, and there's no escaping that he is really old. He has to struggle, and that's something you don't necessarily see in fantasy fiction, because old characters are always really powerful and stuff like that. And there's 3 other books. I'm hoping Cole Buchanan comes and does more, because the 3rd and 4th books were like this, they're over the top and they're great, and everyone should read them. Then we have The Black Hawks by David Ragg. I read this earlier this year. It's pretty cool. It's got a really, really sick cover, which is kind of the reason I bought it. I know you're not supposed to judge a book by its cover, but when it looks as cool as this, what are you going to do? So more or less, our main character, Vedran, or Chell, he's more or less conscripted into being a knight to protect this really whiny prince. He falls into this mercenary company. There's betrayals and invasions, and this really funny current of humour. This really messed up tribe of cannibals, which are really fun for cannibals. Anyway, next up, Mort by Robert Repino. This one was really, really fun. I've gotten many people onto this book as part of my job and outside of my job. More or less, there's this plague, which is really relevant for what's happening right now, engineered by these super intelligent ants. And what this plague does is it makes all the humans die off, and it makes all the animals become humanoid, sort of super intelligent themselves, not furries. Sorry, furries, you're not welcome. And it's so over the top. Our main character is this cat, who is in love with his neighbor's dog. She disappears right at the start of the plague. So this whole thing is his mission to try and find Sheba, who is the dog. And our main character, Mort, he's merciless. He's this really, really, killer cat. And it's really fun exploring what the world would be like if we disappeared, even without a super intelligent plague designed by ants. Second last book. I know this video is getting a bit long. I didn't think I'd be talking this much. Seconds by Brian Lee O'Malley. If you've read Scott Pilgrim, or seen Scott Pilgrim, you're very much on board with O'Malley's storytelling or not. So this one, it's just a single volume, and it's about this girl. Her name is Katie. She has dreams of opening her own restaurant. Right now she works at one, and she finds these mushrooms. And she eats the mushroom, she makes a mistake. So what she can do is she eats the mushroom, writes down the mistake, and then when she goes to bed, she goes back to another day, or she goes to a new day where the mistake never happened. And it evolves into this really gorgeous art style panel. There's a skeleton band there. That's pretty cool. And I think it was just a really fun and different graphic novel style. It's a bit similar to the next book coming up, which is The First 15 Lives of Harry August, in the way that multiple and convergent timelines and the choices you make influence that. And I think that's really fun. It is magical realism at best. I'm hoping this gets picked up and adapted into something one day. And then finally, as I mentioned, the First 15 Lives of Harry August. Try saying that 5 times fast. This one is, I don't know whether to classify it as sci-fi or fantasy, but it's more or less, so Harry August he's dying at the end of his 11th life, and this little girl, he's like, Dr. August, we need your help. And then he dies, and then he goes back to study his 12th life. So the whole premise is these people called albatrosses, because albatrosses are famously long-lived. When they die, they go back and restart their life again, but with the knowledge. And so they're able to pass messages back and forth. And the whole concept of this is someone is destroying the future. And so Harry always has to figure out what is going on. And it's this fun timeline bending, history bending, adventure, detective novel, sort of rollicking thing. And I think it's really cool. Like in one life he's completely debaucherous. And in another life he's an ascetic monk. He goes and becomes invested in 4 or 5 different religions. I think that's really cool. I mean, that's what you do. You try and do different things every time. And yeah, that's where I'll leave it for today. I'll see you all next week. I'm not sure what I'll be doing then. My beard will hopefully have grown back, because I shaved it off last week to cure the boredom. As always, if you like what you see, subscribe, like. Catch you next time.